thank you for coming to my talk. My name is Paul Stack. I will be talking on Windows having its ass kicked by Puppet and PowerShell since 2012. Quick show of hands. Who is a Windows developer? Who finds it really laborious and tedious to configure Windows servers? Yeah. Who cares? Some people care. That's okay. That's allowed. Okay. Another quick show of hands. Who knows Puppet? What Puppet is? Very few. Excellent. You've come to the right place. This means I can waffle on about Puppet for the next 45 minutes. Okay, so about me, I work for a company called OpenTable. We're an American-based company. We make restaurant reservation software. Some of my colleagues are dotted around places. There's one here, there's one up there. And the other two haven't come. What a bunch of... But we're based in the UK, okay? I also am a member of the JetBrains Development Academy. Hattie, who was in the last session, took great pity on me and decided that instead of me having to pay for my tools, that I would be able to get them for free because JetBrains are very good to me. And I am a complete DevOps extremist, okay? I just live and breathe the culture changes that are required for a DevOps culture. If anybody doesn't know what a DevOps culture is, talk to me at the end and I will absolutely chew your ear off about it. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about classic infrastructure management. Okay, Snowflake and Phoenix servers. We're going to talk about infrastructure as code. We're actually going to have a look at some PowerShell scripts. Now, the way I say PowerShell is probably not the way normal people say PowerShell because I have a stupid accent. So when I refer to PowerShell, I actually mean the Windows management framework PowerShell. If I say it in an American accent. Okay, and then we're going to look at Windows, Puppet, and how Puppet works very well with PowerShell in order to kick Windows' ass. Okay, so classic infrastructure management. Who has heard of the runbook? Okay, so I Googled the term runbook, okay, and where this came from is a few years ago within our company, we used to have these runbooks, okay, that our operations team created to manage our Windows servers. And it was basically a long Word document of like 50 pages that they just had to follow step by step by step by step by step, okay? Absolutely horrible beasts. And they're just full of screenshots and they're just terrible, okay? Now I Googled the term runbook and I actually came back with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5 installation guide. Now, it's 416 pages, okay? That is a perfect definition of a runbook, okay? It's just this horrible beast that grows and grows and grows, and we don't even know if parts of the runbook are needed anymore because it just gets added to again and again, okay? But they are a really traditional way of managing our infrastructure. Do we have any operations guys here? Oh, a couple. Do you write runbooks? You try to avoid it. That probably says it all, okay? The reason that runbooks are bad is that people are generally rubbish, okay? We do not perform repetitive tasks very well, okay? The way I would follow steps in a book would be different to how TB would follow steps in a book. I would take shortcuts. I'm quite lazy. I would try to put my own spin on the runbook, okay? Because if I was performing it again and again, then I would know that step 15, which happens in 5 pages' time, I know that I could do now, and then I'm actually running it out of sequence, which is very bad. So people cut corners and they make a lot of mistakes. Okay? We are not machines. We'd like to think that we're machines, but we're not machines. But it's very important that people can only work a certain amount of time. Okay? If you run a person's time at 100% constantly, it's a very bad thing. We should never be running at 100% capacity all the time. What this creates is what we call as Snowflake servers. Snowflake servers was a term that was coined by Martin Fowler in 2012. I think it was last year, like summertime last year. Okay, and its actual definition is that it's something that's so unique that it's very difficult to recreate. Okay, every snowflake is supposedly unique. Has anyone actually seen a snowflake? No, so we just don't know that's true. So, but when you have a Snowflake server, you have a very difficult to reproduce environment. Okay, it makes it really difficult to have consistency between our development environments, our QA environments, and our production environments. When you try and change a Snowflake server, this is when things become really problematic. Okay, we just don't know what can happen when we change a Snowflake server. Excuse me, I'm really hungover, so you'll have to forgive me. Really badly hungover. There can be all sorts of knock-on effects when we try and change these types of servers. But machines are much more reliable at performing these tasks. Okay. Now, machines can sometimes break. I'm not saying machines are flawless, but they can be much more reliable. Okay. You give a machine a script, it will follow that script. It may fail, but that's okay. But it'll generally do things in exactly the same way every time. Okay, generally. I'm not saying that happens all the time. So think about robotics. Robotics are now showing that when we introduce robotics into the industry, machines will do it in a specific way all the time. That's why they bring them in. Okay, machines can also run at a slightly higher capacity. Okay, so let's put some math to that. A developer, 3 developers who work 8 hours a day, you'll only get 24 hours of work out of these guys, okay, per day. Now, one machine can run constantly all day, 24 hours. So if you have 3 machines in the cluster, you immediately get 3 times more work, okay, in a very sweeping generalization. So if we have machines that can take care of a lot of work in our industry, can't we automate our runbooks? Okay, so at OpenTable, we have desperately been trying to move away from manual runbooks. Okay, it broke my heart the first time I had to write a new website, and I was actually told that I had to create a runbook. So we scripted it with PowerShell, and the runbook was run this file. It was basically a one-liner in the runbook that said, just download this file and run it. Okay, we don't want to have 57-page runbooks and 23-page security documents that have to happen after them. It's a nightmare. We don't want to be that. So there is this term that's been introduced a while back, not by OpenTable. Can't take credit for this one, unfortunately. Called infrastructure as code. Okay, and infrastructure as code is basically manage the server, manage your infrastructure in the same way as you manage your applications. Code it, put it in source control, because that way you can see the changes. And you have got your full version control history of what's happening. Okay, so if you think of installing Apache or IIS, okay, after that you'll need to install some folders, and that can be really simple, right? You just write a little 2-line, 3-line script, which will just install all your folders, or your folder structure. That's what infrastructure as code is. Actually writing code which will take care of your infrastructure. Okay, everything can be automated. Okay. Now, sometimes the level of effort required for automation is too high, but most of what we do as development and operations can be automated. There are usually APIs that solve everything. Okay. So if we have infrastructure as code, we can create what's called Phoenix servers. Okay. Phoenix server is that you can recreate it in exactly the same way every time, destroy it, and bring it back to life in exactly the same way every time. Okay, and again, this is another term that was coined by Martin Fowler. He has 2 very, very good blog posts on it. If you do want to find out more about it, I should really have put the links on there. But if you do want to find out more about these blog posts, go and have a read of them, because they're excellent. They will give you some context about what we're discussing. Okay, so there have been a lot of tools throughout the years created for infrastructure as code. Okay, firstly, we have one called CF Engine. Anybody know CF Engine? I know one of the guys in the middle uses it. Okay, I think CF Engine was first brought out in 1993. Okay, it's the granddaddy of all configuration management tools. It's a very declarative syntax. It's not as DSL-like as some of the other configuration management tools, but it's probably everything stemmed off CF Engine, and it's one of the most powerful that are out there. Okay, it's an excellent tool. It's not one that I use. Okay, after that came Puppet. Okay, Puppet Labs created a tool called Puppet. Okay, and that was about 2006. Okay, currently it's a Ruby DSL, and you can write your own DSLs across the top of it. But the way it's actually written, because of the DSL nature of it, it can be swapped out to be anything under the hood, and no one will actually know. Okay, so off the back of that one came Chef. Okay, Chef is written by a company called Opscode, and this is you are actually writing code in Ruby. If you're using Chef, you're writing Ruby. Okay, now that is very good. Developers tend to understand code because we use code all the time, and operations people are getting more used to writing code. Okay, Ruby is probably not the language that I would suggest that people learn first. I don't know why. Maybe other people have their own opinions. I don't like Ruby. And it's an interesting language, but it's a very dynamic language, which is very good for these types of things. Okay, generally speaking, code is better. Why is code better? Anybody care to? This is where we test now and see who's actually paying attention. Why is code better? Can be version, yeah. What? It can be read, yeah. It can be version. Did you say? Somebody? Oh, it's repeatable. Sorry, repeatable. Anything else? Tested. That's the big thing, right? When we write our infrastructure code, when we write our infrastructure configuration as code, we can test it. This is probably the most important reason of why code is better for these things. Okay. Sorry? Depending on your language, right? That's why Ruby, for example, is possibly. Yeah, exactly. But because of the communities that are out there, we can share code, we can get trained on code, okay? We can open source code, we can help other people. There are lots of opportunities when things are actually coded, okay? What can we do on Windows? So Windows infrastructure management has kind of sucked for a very long time. As you can see, some people nodding their heads. Well, all right, so I'm not going to rip into it as much as I did in my last talk, because what was really funny is there was somebody from the Microsoft team sitting in the audience and decided to come and spend an hour with me after my talk telling me why I was wrong. Does anybody in here work for Microsoft? Excellent. Oh, you do? What team? Sorry? Okay, so you're not going to be in the infrastructure side, so I can rip into it as much as I want, right? Okay. It's really crap. So the big scripting framework in Windows is PowerShell. Okay, it was first created in 2006. PowerShell 1 is probably a very sucky piece of software. It didn't really have a huge amount of capabilities, and if you want to see what it's like, build yourself a Windows 2003 web server, and that's what comes with its basic PowerShell can be installed on that. Okay. PowerShell 2 came along, and it was much, much better. Microsoft learned a lot of things from PowerShell 1, okay? Mostly that people didn't want to use it. But when they brought around PowerShell 2, they introduced a lot more APIs. They had some remoting jobs, they had background jobs, they had transactions, they had modules, you could debug, they had an IDE. It got a lot better, okay? And PowerShell 3 came along, and PowerShell 3 is very good. Okay, so there are fantastic APIs. You can schedule jobs with PowerShell 3. You have auto-completion in your IDEs. You have IntelliSense. You have delegation support. You have session connectivity. You have, when you run a job, you can tell it to reboot in the middle, and when it starts back up again, it will kick back in at the same place that the script stopped. It really got very good. Now, unfortunately, a Microsoft thing happened on PowerShell 4. Started the nosedive. Okay, so in PowerShell 4, they've created what's called the desired state configuration. Okay, this was Microsoft's version of a Puppet or a Chef tool. Okay, they've written their own tool to do this. Rather than leveraging the open source tools that are out there, they decided they write their own. Getting rid of 13, 14 years worth of knowledge that the industry had in this area, so Microsoft are trying to reinvent the wheel. Okay, PowerShell is a very good thing. If you're a .NET developer or a Windows developer, I do suggest you learn a little bit of it because it's extremely useful. Okay, and we're going to show you some of the scripts that we have in place. So, managing Windows servers 2008 with PowerShell is a lot easier now. Okay, I'm just going to show you some stuff. Can you see my screen? Excellent. It is Windows, unfortunately. Ugh. Bloody machine timeouts. Okay. So we have a lot of scripts that we are... I'm actually going to open source a lot of these, so hopefully it'll be done quite soon. But we have a directory of what we call runbooks. And if I just maximize the screen. Okay, so we can do things like ASP.NET Regis, change local admin passwords, configure proxy servers, environment variable setup, importing certificates, installing applications, installing Chocolatey, of course. Anyone know what Chocolatey is? Okay. Chocolatey is just an excellent automation framework for Windows. It's just like apt-get, but for Windows. Okay. We can install MVC, .NET 4, .NET 4.5, NuGet, performance counters, PowerShell 3 itself, join machines to domains. Okay. Anything that can be done on Windows, it can now actually be automated. Okay, so I'll show you some of the examples, okay? So let's register .NET 4 with IIS. Now, it looks really horrible code because it's, of course, a scripting framework. There's not really many scripting frameworks out there that are beautiful. But it can do the job, okay? So what we have is we invoke an expression of a command using, what is going on here? Using, it's actually starting and trying to run the script every time. So you can see you point in the Microsoft.NET Framework 64 v4, and off the end of the screen you will see called a exe, ASP.NET Regis. You can pass in an error action, and then you get the data back, okay, out host. Now, we can work on what's called the last error exit code, and if the last exit code is not equal to 0, then we know it's been successful. Or, sorry, we know that it hasn't been successful. If it is a 0 exit code, then it hasn't been successful. So we know at this point that we can just run and register .NET 4 with IIS in a simple script. To run that, we would just do just call the script itself. And it says registration complete. Okay, really simple, really easy, doesn't really do anything too much. Okay. Now when we start to get a little bit more intelligent about what we're doing, we can start to use other pieces of the puzzle. So a machine that doesn't have .NET 4 on it, which machines don't generally come with the latest and greatest frameworks pre-installed. You've got to install them yourself. So we can actually use, anyone know the web platform installer? Microsoft? So we can actually go off to, there is a command line version of it, and we go off to the web platform command line. So it's webpicmd.exe. We can pass in a bunch of known parameters. So, suppress, reboot, accept, EULA, etc., and actually call the product Net Framework 4. Okay, you can do this with Net Framework 4.5. You can do this with MVC. So we're actually at this point going off to a third-party service, downloading our executables and actually executing them there and then. Okay, this is great. It means that we don't have to store all these large EXEs. Source control. Now, if we can do this in a maintained fashion every time, and it'll run in the same way, then we can actually take our runbook, and at that point, we can actually automate it. So these are some of the types of runbooks that we're creating in our company at the minute. So we've got APIs, we've got base web servers, we've got consumer web, we've got machine networking, mobile web, split out web. So we're trying to reuse a lot of the scripts for different things. Now at the start, it was pretty much, I think this was actually the first one I created. And I like to time things. I like to see if they get faster every time. Such a geek, it's ridiculous. So we have a site, and from there we install .NET 4. We have Windows 2K8 server install pieces. So you know when you go start programs, turn Windows features on and off, Microsoft have actually very helpfully given us APIs that can do that. And you would just load, in fact, I'll show you that script. Then after that, we install specific versions of MVC. We register ASP.NET IIS. We install 7-zip for our deployment. It creates some folder directory structures. Installs environment variables. Installs performance counters. Deletes the default IIS site, which is a really bad idea. Do people delete that website when they go into the new box? You don't really care, do you? Oh, fair enough. We install some certificates. Certificate management in Windows is really painful. Doing it with one line of PowerShell is fantastic. I can show you that script as well. We actually set up SSL and non-secure bindings. So we've actually taken the entire automation from when a server has been created to the point of which it's a fully fledged web server, installing all the packages. Right? This is really useful for us. Now, we can take a lot of our learnings and apply it in different places. So that one was very specific to that web server. So now what we've done is actually got a little bit more clever, and we've actually created reusable scripts that we pass configuration files into. Okay, so there's nothing hard-coded in here. We actually get a configuration passed in as a JSON file. So, and where that is we can actually be, all of our configuration is actually just specified in JSON. We can say it's a site name, we can say the folder, we can say the app pools, the host headers, any virtual directories that we want to set up in IIS, paths, the whole way down. We can give it bindings, hosts, everything that we want to actually code, we can pass in as JSON. Now, what that allows us to do is actually write some tests. Let me just get you my runbooks, functions. So using a given when then style testing framework called Pester. Anyone ever heard of Pester for PowerShell? The names are fantastic, aren't they? And we can actually, when we pass in the correct JSON files, we can actually take the JSON, deserialize it in an object, and at that point we can actually start to pull properties off the back of it. Okay, and these entire suite of tests can be hooked up to your CI tool, and it can continually go on. Now, what that allows us to do is, as I say, we can just pass that configuration into a PowerShell file. And there's no hard coding in here, apart from the .NET 4, or the MVC version 4. But everything else is actually used in the object that's passed in and created from the JSON file. Anybody think that this would be a better way of doing it? Still lost everyone. Yeah. All sleeping. Great. Great. So I'm going to leave PowerShell because it looks as though everyone's getting fed up with it, which is quite good. But I am actually going to do a quick demo in this. So the way these scripts are created, they're idempotent. Okay, not impotent, idempotent. It's very important that we distinguish between them. Okay, so it means that we can run them again and again and again, and they won't create any adverse effects on our server. So this is actually one of our QA. It's actually his QA server at the minute, and I'm going to destroy it. Okay, I'm actually going to delete a website from it. It's gone. Okay, and we're going to run the script and try and bring it back, and hopefully it'll work. May not. And we call new split out. Okay, and the environment is UK QA test, and the domain is JP. It's actually going to do the full runbook and try and install any of the pieces that are currently missing. And you can see that it's going the whole way down through it. You can see that it's using the web platform command line tool. It's setting environment variables. It's setting application pools. And it's finished. So it's actually just gone through, just check the configuration of our web server, that it's exactly what it should be. And if it hasn't created any, it will install it. So what we should actually get now is if I refresh this, we should get qa.opentable.jp back. Yes. So what this allows us to do is this is our infrastructure as code. Okay, this is really important because it means that if people go and tinker with web servers, like he does, then we can just run the same script again and again just to bring it back. Okay. Now, it's painful having to run a script manually. Okay, logging into X amount of servers, invoking a script, and bringing it back up is horrible. So this is what Puppet allows us to do. Okay. So let's quickly talk about Puppet. Excellent. I'm literally putting that back up for that, just that one slide. So Puppet's really useful, but it's from the Linux and Unix world, okay? And as things in the Linux and Unix world are very different to Windows, of course, all the functionality of Puppet doesn't work on Windows, okay? Puppet Labs are investing a huge amount of time and money trying to get Windows support. They've actually just hired Rob Reynolds, who is the guy who wrote Chocolatey, and he is now heading up a huge spur in order to make Windows infrastructure better using Puppet. Okay, but the simple details of what we can do makes things a lot better. I wasn't actually joking. I was putting that up for one slide, one word. So let's have a look at actually some scripts. So what we can do with Puppet is, again, you can see the similarities in what we're trying to do with PowerShell, okay? So we've got 7-zip using app dynamics, ASP.NET Reg IIS, with performance counters, base Windows Server, configuring websites, environment variables, host names, we're installing Mono and Nginx and Node.js. We've got proxies, we've got services, and then we've got all of these Windows features. Okay, so switching features on and off. Okay, now using exactly what we've already learned. So if I go into Windows features, IIS, application development. Okay, now what we're actually doing here is just declaring a class. And it's just basically saying Windows feature web ASP.NET, okay? Windows feature web net ext. And it's just going to use a base class called a Windows feature class, or a definition in this case. Which is actually open sourced. Come on. And it's just running this PowerShell script, okay, which is basically saying the default, if you don't tell it if it has to be present or absent, it'll always choose present by default. And it's just going down. If it's present, exec add feature, and you're just using some PowerShell where you're saying import module server manager, add Windows feature. Okay, we're not doing anything clever here. We're just using the APIs that come directly with the server manager DLL module. Okay, and if you have to remove it, you remove Windows feature. So that allows us to just be as simple as saying that. So that's going to, for the server that this module is applying, it will take that, it will just go down through the list, and it'll just turn the features on. Really simple, really easy. We're not doing anything too too bright. Now, we can start to get a lot more clever with what's going on in here. So we can now actually start to specify and take all these little bits and pieces of modules and start to create what we would class actually as a configuration file. And this one is this is our base Windows server, okay? And we make sure that Puppet is running. Puppet can manage itself, which is really odd. We configure our proxies, we configure environment variables, we install 7-zip, we install .NET 4, we turn lots of features on, and then we can actually specify that they have to run in a specific order. So this one will run, then this one, then this one. And just using this notation, you can tell it what order to run in. Okay, really simple, really easy, but it is actually extremely powerful at what it can do. And from there, we can basically write any level of modules to create a server. Now, we're trying to change things slightly at the minute because we want to move to an environment of one application per server. Okay, I don't know how people in here work. Do people basically throw lots of applications on the same infrastructure? Okay, so that it's a traditional way of doing it, and I'm not saying it's a wrong way of doing it. By no means is it. It's just what it means is that if there's a problem with that server, you're actually killing all the applications on the server rather than one. So we're now going to try and move to an environment of one application per server so that if I write crappy code, it doesn't affect Andy's work. Hello? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're doing. We're not reinventing anything. We're just starting to think about how our infrastructure is deployed in production to be more sensitive to changes in the environment. Okay, and using Puppet, we're actually creating an instance of what we class as roles. Okay, so a role for us we can actually say that a role is a location API server. Okay, and that is made up of a number of profiles where we install Linux as a base or configure Linux to a base level. We install Node.js, we install npm, we configure our application. And then we actually have a big to-do in there saying refactor this out of here, but we tell nginx configuration. Okay, so we're actually specifying that a single application is configured with a number of roles inside Puppet, and we can apply those rules. So we're just trying to change things up and see how it works. So what I thought I'd do is actually show you what Puppet is like on a real box. So there is no IIS on this box. Okay, IIS is missing. I just destroyed the box before I came in and ran some scripts on it just to make sure that everything worked. Otherwise, I'd have looked a bit stupid. But so it's basically a case of this is what we would class as a box that has gone wrong, and the Puppet agent will run every 30 minutes by default, and it will try and apply the configurations that are missing on the box. Oh no. I've just broken my SSH connection. Please work. Just bear with me 1 minute. I'm just logging into a box in London, so this could be slow, but we'll be fine. If I can type. There we go. It's password 123 with a capital P. Yeah. Okay, so Puppet works on the notation of nodes. Okay, each machine that you want to configure is classed as a node, and you would actually use the fully qualified name in order to tell it what to apply. So we can see that our test VM4, how we're actually trying to run roles at the minute, just to see about the componentization. So I'm actually going to take an entire list of Windows configuration, and I'm actually going to put it in test VM3. Please work. And I'm going to go back to test VM3 just to prove that it's the same box. There we go. Test VM3 env.skunkworks. Okay. So we're actually going to apply the Puppet configuration here. If this fails, this is going to make me look ridiculous. But what we can do is we can put my video from NDC on, so it's okay. So what it's actually going off and doing is it goes off and it gets all the manifests from our GitHub repository. It will bring them down. It will compile them into its own catalog, and it will, from them, we have this idea of a Puppet master in Puppet, and that's the central source of truth, okay? That's what configures all the different nodes, and it keeps all the different nodes in spec. And what it's actually going to do is it goes off to the master, says, hey, I'm this machine. Tell me what configuration I need to be in. So the Puppet master says, here's your configuration. And what it does is it will try and keep that configuration at a normal state, okay? And if it's missing anything, it'll install it. As you can see, that it's actually, forget about that activate Windows now. I haven't stolen it. Okay, this is not from Pirate Bay, it's okay. But it'll try and install any of the roles that it needs to in order to keep the server at a standard configuration. So what this is actually doing, this specific one, is it's installing our Windows features. In this case, it's actually installing IIS. Okay? So IIS is missing from the box, and therefore all the sites are missing from the box. And what it'll do is it'll install IIS, and then it'll install all the applications in IIS. It takes 60 seconds, I think. Yeah, so the whole thing is the way you create Puppet scripts, you would basically say, run this command if the state is not this. Okay, so there are different keywords inside exec. Exec is one of the resource types in Puppet, and you would say run add Windows feature IIS if get Windows feature IIS is not there. Okay, if it returns a 0. So it's assuming that if it's there, it's working. Yes. Yes, but if you want to go further in, of course you can go in further down and say, not only is IIS there, but check that these web servers are configured against IIS, and check that the configuration of each web server is set up correctly in IIS. So we can actually do that in a second, and we'll destroy one of the sites in the same way as we did with PowerShell, get it to run again, and it'll just reapply the website, the actual configuration of the site. Ugh. So this is what happens if it fails. It goes very red. But you will see that IIS has been installed, okay, and we can now go into IIS. Come on. And we can see that applications are actually being installed in IIS. Okay, these applications weren't there before because IIS didn't exist, so it's installed them and created the applications. This is just actually failing because it's trying to start the application up. Stupid remote signed. Is it going to finish? Are you going to finish? So let's just leave that. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, so the question is that this can be achieved by other tools like Wix and Install Shield, and do I use those, or when would you choose to use those rather than Puppet or PowerShell? Is that correct? I don't use those. I know that they actually exist, but we used to be very much a Windows shop. We're not anymore a strictly Windows shop. So Puppet is great for us because it can apply configurations against our Windows machines and our Linux machines from one central place. So that's the reason why we don't use anything like that.
Those web
all of our applications are all managed in-house, so we don't have to do any third-party installations or management. Okay. And then at the end, it tells you it's finished the catalog run, 196 seconds, press any key to continue. Okay. Now, if I just destroy some sites out of this, it can't start the applications up because there's I'm messing around with configuration at the minute. So if I just delete some of the applications and get it to recreate them, and then let's run Puppet again. And it should be a lot shorter this time. It doesn't try and rerun all the steps. It knows the configuration state because of the catalog, and it will only apply the steps that it needs to. So it should be a lot shorter this time. Any other questions while we're waiting? Anybody want to come up and dance? Andy, you like to dance? So we'll come back to this in a second, and I'll just go back to the slides. There's very few left. You'll be glad to know. So, Puppet, I extensively use Puppet. Okay, I'm not saying that Puppet is better than any of the others. It is. It's not. I'm just joking. It's just it's the way I work. Okay, it means that we could take the PowerShell scripts that we had written before and almost take them identically into our Puppet files. Okay, so we didn't have to rewrite anything after it was created. So it works really well for us, and it's a simple DSL that anyone can understand within our team. Okay, the company behind it, Puppet Labs, have created what's called the Puppet Forge. Okay, so you can go and you can open source a lot of your modules, and you can go and actually have a look at what's out there. Now, we'll have a quick look at the Forge. Now, all the you can see on the right-hand side, we've got popular tags. Okay, Ubuntu has got 264 modules. Debian is 221. RHEL-based servers have 164. Okay, Windows has a lowly 45. Okay, and that just shows the difference in the different community. Okay, so you got 45. That's actually gone up quite a lot. There has been it's actually the third highest searched for term on the Forge, because people are starting to realize that Windows infrastructure management needs to be better. People are starting to wake up a little bit more. Now, there's some great packages on here. You can control Windows firewalls, auto updates, event logs, registry settings, MS SQL, vCenter, Zabbix, Splunk, Samba shares, WinNTP, Chocolatey. Anything that we can do, people are actually starting to open source a lot more back. And we, OpenTable, we're actually going to start pushing a lot more. We've only pushed 2 so far to the Forge, but we will push a lot more to the Forge. And people are actually, so Liam Bennett is one of the developers in London, and he's actually just created a Visual Studio plugin, okay, for Puppet, because it was really annoying him that as an administrator in his company, he would have to actually install Visual Studio, and people would have different settings. So he just created a module that just keeps everybody in the same style of settings to Visual Studio. So you can go on and you can install. Sorry.
What's your experience of the course? I can imagine, maybe it's just because I'm not an ops person, but it feels very scary to me. I would want to review these very carefully.
Yeah, yeah.
Normally pretty close.
The political answer is yes. The actual answer is no. There are some modules on there that there's no real verification stage. Okay, people can just go and upload a package and call it anything, and then says this is what it does in the README. It could be doing anything. So you would have to use this with caution. And it's a very good point. But it's like using packages from NuGet or packages from apt-get. You have to be really sure that the package that you're actually installing is actually going to do what it says on the tin. It's really important to do that. But the nice thing is that in most of these, you usually have a link to the GitHub account. and you can actually go and have a look at the actual code. Okay. If you see a module on there that doesn't have a GitHub URL or a URL to see their source code, it's probably one that you would want to stay away from. So Puppet is an orchestration tool. Okay, if I wanted to install IIS using PowerShell scripts, I would have to log on to each one of the web servers and run the script. Okay, or I'd have to set up a scheduled task that ran a PowerShell script and make sure that that script is actually applied. Okay, now what Puppet allows us to do is it stores all our configuration in source control, checks it out on the Puppet master, and then it basically says, oh, so in 30 minutes time, we'll check your configuration. And every 30 minutes, it checks in itself. Okay, and it gives you reports back. You can actually see a dashboard of what it looks like, so which is really cool. It shouldn't. That's the main point. It shouldn't change. But people do log on servers, Windows boxes, and just change things, right? That's the trouble. It's when we want to get our stuff done, we will do whatever it takes to get it done. And if that requires us to log on a server and change a setting on a web server, it's generally what we'll do, right? And it can have adverse effects. So we've had an instance recently where we have some load balancer rules. And in order to get someone's work done, they changed the load balancer rule, which broke something else, and it wasn't spotted for like 2 days. Okay, so using a configuration management tool, make sure that it's the configuration that's stored in source control and then applied to each and every individual box. Okay. So I've got like two minutes left, but I should actually be able to just show you that it's recreated those sites. So if I refresh, we should go up in the number of sites, hopefully. There we go. So we get more sites back. Okay. So it'll just, if anyone goes in, any inquisitive hands go in and start changing configuration, then Puppet will keep that. It will take it back to the same configuration, which is really good because people shouldn't be changing things manually. They just shouldn't be. So we're getting into what's called immutable infrastructure then, okay? So what my ideal would be is that we wouldn't change our servers at all. We would use a tool like Puppet to build new servers, and we would deploy the new server every time rather than changing the configuration of the existing server. Okay? So it's a whole branch of theory called immutable infrastructure. There's a really good blog post about it. In fact, I'll give you the blog post URL at the end, and you can have a read of it. And it's a very, very good post on an experience that is quite outside what we do at the minute. Also check out docker.io, and you'll be able to see about deploying containers in Linux environments. Okay. So in summary, code is much better for managing our infrastructure. Okay. PowerShell is a great way of managing our configuration, but we actually need to be able to orchestrate the administration of our servers. Okay? Puppet complements what PowerShell does perfectly. It takes those scripts for Windows management and it applies them in an orchestrated manner across many, many web servers. Okay? Now we're talking, in our QA environment, we have something like 300. So we got like 300 web servers in our QA environment. Okay? So to do that and log on every time and run a script would be or set up a manual job that runs the script would just be terrible, right? So Windows Server Management isn't as crap as it used to be. That's the main key takeaway here. You go and look at tools. I'm not telling you to go and download Puppet and play with Puppet. You can go and use Chef or you can go and use CF Engine. The main thing to take away today is that it was really bad before and now it's a lot better. Okay, so there's some links for some further info. You can go to Puppet Labs, you can go to the Forge, you can read up about PowerShell if you really want to, and if you want to, you can go to our GitHub and you can start to see some of our open source modules. Hello. That's exactly what we're doing at the minute, and we're finding that's really beneficial. System Center, what? SCCM. Do you use that? There's a real life user of SCCM. Wow, that's amazing. No, I'm just joking. So I've never really been a fan of SCCM. I think it's very tough to configure. It's very tough to get started with, and of course it's. There certainly is. It's a Windows platform only, unfortunately. Because we are broadening our horizons and not just sticking on Windows, we need to be able to manage both our Windows and our Linux machines. So that's why you think. Okay, maybe so. Maybe since the new version of SCCM, so maybe it's hitting the peak before it drops off even more. Sorry? Not the Balmer peak, I've just been told. Any last questions? You all want to go for a drink? Okay. That's exactly what it does. So if you go in and John asked the same question, is that how do you know that what's configured inside is correct? What it will do is if you tell Puppet that this website, qa.opentable.jp, needs to be pointing to this folder structure, and somebody has changed that, Puppet will go and reapply that configuration. You just have to know how fine-grained you want to take it.
What if I manually add another application? Will it be able to recognize it and destroy it?
Yes, you can tell it to do that. So with Windows, with host file management, you can basically say, include this host file, and then destroy everything else. And that's what it'll do. So it'll stop people creating rogue host file entries.
But it has to be explicit.
Yeah, you would have to be very explicit about what you wanted to do and what you don't. Any last questions?
I would like to ask you about the negative part of this orchestration, because such high-level script tendency to have only one positive part. Yeah? Because if you are installing several different components, there is high possibility, that one of them fail. You have only one part, you have only two options: stop and delete everything and start again. But sometimes it is possible to make another part that is, let's say, alternative part because we have failed. So, is Puppet support such different or alternative part or negative part? Something went wrong.
I'd like to say yes. I don't think that's the case. So you're telling it to configure something in one way. If it doesn't get configured in that way, Puppet will report that as a failure. Maybe I'm not understanding the use case for doing it another way. So come and have a chat to me, and I want to understand that one a little bit more, if that's okay. Okay. Let's see how long we can keep everyone sitting here. No, I'm just joking. Thanks, guys. Thank you all for your time.